A former Toronto mayor has been appointed as a special advisor to the Ontario NDP to strike what the party says is a new deal for municipalities. Well, what does that mean? The man himself, David Miller, joining us now to studio. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me on.
And, you know, this is an interesting time here that you're appointed to this role. We are seeing a contentious debate playing out over bike lanes between the province and the city here. In this role here, what are you expected to accomplish?
Well, cities and towns across Ontario have been calling for a new deal, a new financial deal, and a new sense of partnership with the province, because this provincial government in particular has a habit of interfering with what should be local decisions. And, you know, people want to live in places that meet their needs. They know how to make local decisions with their local government, which is a government that's open and transparent and makes decisions in public, unlike Queen's Park, where they're made in private and you never quite know why. So the goal of this review is to say, how do we build a new partnership of mutual respect so that Queen's Park does what it does well and our cities and towns do what they do well, and how do you pay for it? And I think it's really important because the NDP is the official opposition, and it's a sign that Queen's Park might in future take seriously the financial health of our cities and towns.
And you're uniquely positioned here. You're somebody who was mayor of Toronto, I believe, from 2003 to 2010, so 7 years there. Before that, you were a city councillor. You know this city in and out, and the city has gone at the province back and forth over a number of issues. The latest, as I mentioned, bike lanes here. When you're looking at the city of Toronto and the issues specifically of importance to residents here, what would you advise in this role? And I know it's early days, it's only day one, but do you have any sort of idea where you see this going?
Well, it's about an hour or two. So, well, I do think there are some principles, and, you know, it's province-wide. And one of the things I bring to the table, I was also chair of the auto industry mayors after the 2008 financial crisis, and I worked with other cities and towns across Canada on the New Deal for Cities with the Paul Martin government. So I have a sense of how these issues resonate across the province, not just in Toronto. But the bike lanes is a good example. So is the fact that Doug Ford, in the middle of an election, changed the election rules and boundaries. And 4 judges of the Supreme Court said that was wrong. Now, 5 said he had the power to do that. But we should have a relationship that allows local governments to act with their residents and gives them the money to do it. So what are things to look at? Housing. You know, housing was downloaded years ago, and there's never been the money to fix it. New housing for people of all walks of life is often stalled because Queen's Park interferes. Things like public transit. You know, the Eglinton LRT was started when I was mayor. We started the planning for it, and it's not open because the province isn't competent to do it. It's shocking. So, you know, all of these kinds of issues require a relationship that's the right kind of relationship, allowing the municipal government, particularly the city, to act in public like they do, not in private, and having the money and the funding necessary to deal with it. And I think, you know, housing certainly, transit funding, sharing operating funding, having revenues that are consistent from year to year, all of those issues are on the table.
You mentioned some criticism of the province there. They would argue back and say, listen, their policies and them stepping in has helped to move things along for housing. For instance, as you're sitting in this role here, would you ever see a situation where a provincial government would need to interfere or get more involved with what municipalities are doing?
That is a really great question. And my answer is no. The province's role is to set policy. They're terrible when they try to implement. You know, the Eglinton LRT is a perfect example, right? Still not open. And it's probably the biggest reason we have gridlock in a lot of Toronto is that we haven't opened this new rapid transit. The province's role is to set policy. So under the former government, for example, the Places to Grow Act said cities and towns should be more dense. Fair enough. But then it's the job of the city and town to get on with it. And by the way, the province needs to give proper revenues and ensure that cities and towns have proper revenues, not these one-off deals. You know, why do they happen? We saw in the Greenbelt that this particular government was doing one-off deals to benefit key donors. Is that the kind of place we think we are? You know, if you give money to the government, you get your needs met. It should be what the needs are. And yes, the province has a role to set province-wide policy, but local people know their neighborhoods and their cities and their towns better, and the local governments they elect know it best. And that's the partnership we need to facilitate if we want this province to have the kind of places to live that we all think we should.
Okay, really quickly, about 10 seconds left here. At what point does the public see your plan in motion?
We'll be starting right away, and I'll be meeting with cities and towns across the province. We'll be inviting public input. Hopefully the plan will be ready next year, middle of the year. That's the target.
David Miller, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on.